you're dating as a Christian, you want to be able to do this discovery thing of, gee, how can I discover who might be the right person for me for the rest of my life? But you also want to remain sexually pure. And sadly, a lot of people put themselves in really bad situations where it's hard to maintain that because they spend so much time all alone with them. You've got to be smart. While you don't necessarily have to group date when you're getting more serious in dating, you need to be smart. Don't be spending tons of time all alone by yourself with someone of the opposite sex because you're probably going to get yourself in trouble. And I think adults ought to be more concerned about that as their young people start dating and stuff. Don't be putting them into situations that most adults wouldn't put themselves into. I mean, I'm a married guy. I wouldn't spend all kinds of time alone with a woman all by myself who's not my wife. Why not? Because something could happen. Don't you love your wife? Yeah, but I wouldn't do that. Why? Because something could happen. I mean, most adults wouldn't put themselves in a situation where they'd be all by themselves with a person of the opposite sex, even though they're married, even though they're committed, even though they're mature. Why? They're not that dumb. They know they could get themselves in trouble. But yet, we put our young people in that very scenario where they're all by themselves in a situation where no one else is around, and then everyone is shocked when they fall into sexual sin. We just got to be smarter about that. Don't be putting yourself in situations like that. I was talking to a pastor one time about his daughter, and he was telling me about his kids and stuff, and he has this teenage daughter, 16 years old, shows me her picture. She's drop dead gorgeous. And I just happened to ask the question. I said, well, is she here with you this weekend? And he said, oh, no, she's with her boyfriend back at the house. And I said, really? He said, oh, yeah, they just spend all day on Saturdays in their room all by themselves with the door closed while they're doing their homework. I'm thinking, you moron. You think they're in there doing their homework the whole time? I mean, come on. He wouldn't do that. He wouldn't put himself with someone of the opposite sex all by themselves all day long with a door closed. But yet here's a pastor who lets his kid do this thing while they're just doing their homework. And then if she comes home and says, well, Dad, I'm pregnant, he's going to be shocked and amazed. Well, come on. We got to be smarter than that. Don't put yourself in scenarios where you know there's potential for failure. Just be smarter, more intentional about these things. Again, when you're doing serious dating, you don't necessarily have to do group dating all the time. But then, on the other hand, you don't need to be spending hours and hours and hours all by yourself over at somebody's apartment when mom and dad aren't home, sitting on the couch watching movies for hours on end. You're going to get yourself in trouble. Be smart about this stuff. This is a big question. How long should I date before I get married? On the one hand, you don't want to all of a sudden meet somebody and in 3 weeks announce, guess what, we're getting married. I mean, that's not very smart. You're going to wind yourself in a situation that's probably not going to be very good because you don't really know each other. So you want to give enough time where you get to know each other, a year, 2 years. But see, that by then you ought to be getting really serious. Are we going to keep going with this thing? That's why I think if you're dating seriously at 18, 19 years of age, chances are you're not going to wait till way after college before you get married. It's a ludicrous, absurd situation. You're going to find yourself getting into a sexual temptation that you're not going to be able to stay out of. And I don't understand parents today who literally threaten their young people. Don't you dare get married too young. Don't you dare. I won't pay for your college. I won't pay for your wedding. Come on, what are you doing? You better, if your kid is really that serious and they really love each other, better to help them do life right in the first place. All that other stuff can be dealt with as you go along. Sadly today, I fear a lot of parents really don't take sexual sin very seriously. All you got to do is go up to most people in church and have them say, gee, you know what, my daughter's having sex with her boyfriend, and most people will go, oh, gee, well, that's too bad, we'll pray for her. Or someone might say, gee, my son's moved in with his girlfriend, and everybody will go, oh, gee, that's too bad. Well, hopefully they'll get married and they'll work it all out. You won't get much of a response. But have someone say, gee, my 19-year-old is going to marry her 21-year-old boyfriend. Oh, listen to the howls of protest. This is insane, for crying out loud. We're more concerned about some stupid cultural thing about how old you have to be when you're married than we are about sin and the very things that destroys people's lives. Never mind, those who are sexually active before marriage have a much higher divorce rate than those that aren't. Never mind that those who live together have a much higher divorce rate than those who don't live together first. Oh, we don't care about that. God forbid that we'd get married at 21 years of age or 20 years of age or 19 or whatever it is. I think that we're upside down on this thing, and it's gotten absolutely crazy. So you start getting in a situation where you're seriously falling in love with somebody. Again, that's why you want to be careful about when you start doing that, based on your age. If you want to wait till after college before seriously considering marriage, then wait until then to start seriously dating. But you start seriously dating earlier in life and you really fall in love and you want to move forward with this, better you do it right in the first place. You know, there's a lot of things the Bible isn't very clear about, or kind of, soft, and there's gray areas, and you can have all sorts of different denominations arguing about, well, it means this or it means that. There's some issues the Bible doesn't even talk about. For example, what does the Bible say about global warming? Well, it doesn't say anything about global warming, okay? It's not in there. So there's all kinds of things. But if there's one thing where the Bible is really clear on, it's on this issue that a Christian should not be marrying a non-Christian. For crying out loud, you shouldn't even be dating a non-Christian. So you got to be smart about these things. Don't intentionally neglect the Bible because, well, he's really cute or I think she's really special. And for crying out loud, of all the people who get married, Christians who get married to non-Christians and then write me letters later because they're so unhappy and they're so miserable and they won't go to church with me and they won't go to church with the kids and stuff. Come on, be smarter than that in the first place. If you really love God and God is an important part of your life, you have no business marrying or even dating in the first place a non-Christian. And now let me add this warning. A lot of people, what they'll do is, girls or guys will bring their unsaved boyfriend, girlfriend to church, and then all of a sudden, they'll finally pray a prayer or something, and they'll go, oh, woo, he's a Christian, now I can marry him. Be smarter about that too. You don't know if he's really a Christian just because they prayed a prayer or something. It takes time to see if someone's going to really follow through on their faith. Jesus gave a parable of the sower who went around sowing seeds in the ground. And the basic premise of the parable is it takes time to find out whether or not it's going to stick. Some seed, Jesus said, falls upon rocks. It's not going to grow. Some fell among thorns. It choked the life out of them. It takes time to work this stuff out. Don't just go running off and marrying some guy because you brought him to church for a couple of times and all of a sudden, oh, hallelujah, he's a Christian now. It takes time to figure this stuff out. So be smart about this stuff. Best thing in the first place is quit trying to use, someone who's a non-Christian, trying to drag them to church to force them to be a Christian so now you can date them and marry them. We need to be smart about this stuff. Again, the Bible's really, really clear on this issue, and you shouldn't be struggling with it. That's one of the dumbest things people do today. You would think in their head that it seems to make a certain amount of sense. Yeah, let's do a test drive. Let's work it out ahead of time. Well, this is not a car, okay? This is not, and God knows what he's talking about. The Bible forbids such type of arrangements. But a lot of people say, well, it doesn't really matter. My friends think it's okay and stuff. But look at the results. All studies show that people who live together first have a much higher divorce rate than those who don't. So clearly, it doesn't work. It's a bad idea. Forget what the Bible says. Just normal surveys will show you, statistics will show you, it's a really bad idea. And look, the reason why a lot of people do this is because they're fighting this whole, idea of I need to be so old before I get married. If we weren't pushing our kids into that kind of a corner in the first place, they wouldn't be thinking, gee, let's live together first and wait till we're old enough to get married. It's all a bunch of part of this stupidity of delay marriage. If Christian young people knew that they would have the support of their parents and their church and their faith family to start life early, if that's what they choose to do, there wouldn't be so much of a desire to go live with each other in the first place. So let's get back to the basics. Let's start doing stuff right. There's no reason in the world anybody needs to live together before they get married. No. Well, the Bible would say, have sex when you get engaged. Okay? It's pretty clear. Wait till you're married. Which, again, I'm totally against these people who delay, or they'll say, well, couples will come up to me and say, gee, we're getting married. I said, great, when do you get married? Oh, about 5 years from now, we have a date picked out. Oh, for crying out loud. If you're going to get engaged, there should be no more than 12 months that goes by from the time of the engagement to the time of the marriage. If anything, that's too long. For crying out loud. Just, if you're going to get married for crying out loud. Plan 6 months out in advance, send out all the invitations, get married, then have all the sex you want, and make yourselves happy as you can possibly be. But don't do this nonsense of we're eventually going to get married anyway, so start having sex. Because what you start doing is you start breaking the rules, you start putting it in the context of lust and of sin and doing things the wrong way, and there's all kinds of negative consequences to all that stuff. If there weren't, I wouldn't care. God wouldn't care, but they do have negative consequences for this stuff. So quit putting ourselves in these ridiculous scenarios where we're finally in love, we're finally going to get married after dating for 80 years, and now that we're engaged, we're going to get married 30 years from. I mean, come on, let's stop this. You're going to get married, and then this becomes a non-issue anyway. Sex is the incredible glue that God designed to hold two people together for life. It's like, I don't know if you've ever used packing tape or stuff like that you use with boxes and stuff. That stuff's really sticky. All you got to do is take some of it, put it on your arm. Man, that stuff will hang on there, and then rip it off. Ow! It really hurts when you rip it off, okay? But then you reapply it again, and you tear it off again. It might hurt a little bit, but not so much anymore. Then you put it back on, you rip it off. Pretty soon, doesn't hurt much at all. It might still kind of stick for a long time, but it doesn't really hold anything together. This is what happens every time you have sex with a different person. The first one is like, wow, it really holds. Ow, does that ever hurt? Okay? That's what should be happening between you and your spouse when you get married. It's supposed to hold you together. But when you've had sex with lots of people, after a while, it just doesn't hold them. That's why people who have been very sexually active ahead of time have a much higher divorce rate than those who don't. Recent study that was done, and I mentioned in the video that talked about, they interviewed women who were 30 years of age and older. And of the women who said they only had one sexual partner, just their spouse, they only had a 20% divorce rate. Those who reported having one other person, it jumped to almost 50%. Those who reported just another guy besides that, we're talking only 3 guys, it jumps to almost 60%. I mean, it's the single greatest indicator of whether or not a couple will succeed in life, is this sexual purity thing. So that's why this is so powerful. God meant it to be a great holder together. It should really, really hang in there, but don't be jumping in and out with different guys. You'll find it doesn't hold. You have sex with a lot of different girls, it doesn't hold. Wait until marriage.
See, that's really good.
No, it's better for teens to keep their pants on, and then they don't have to worry about anything else. Taking birth control, I mean, come on, for crying out loud. You've already stepped over the line, I might anyway. That dramatically increases the chance that you're going to have sex anyway. It's not worth it. And don't forget, birth control will not protect you from the myriad of sexually transmitted diseases out there. As Pam Stencil says in her section, the worst thing that can happen to you is not pregnancy. That's what everybody worries about. Who am I get pregnant? Who am I get? Oh, as long as I don't get pregnant, I'm okay. Pregnancy, my dear, is the least of your concerns. You could wind up with a disease that will kill you. Or at a minimum, you can get it and have it for life and give it to whoever you do eventually have it. Whoever you do eventually marry, and then they'll have it for life. There's so many reasons not to have sex. Oh man, this idea of taking birth control just in case, it's a bad idea. Even in our culture today, if people do buy into the idea that, gee, you shouldn't have sex, well, they come up with all these other things that's virtually sex anyway. They play this stupid game saying, well, as long as it wasn't really penetration, then it's really not sex. As long as I didn't really have intercourse, it's really not sex. Hey, you can get to sex way before that. I tell people, if it involves this general area, it's sex, okay? This idea of feeling each other all up and it's not sex, or this idea of just, well, we just did it with oral, it's not sex. Hey, it's sex. And of the studies that they have done on sex, they find that there's really no difference when they've done the scans on the brains on whether or not someone actually penetrates or actually has intercourse or a lot of this other stuff. some researchers say even having making out and kissing can put the brain in the same context of regular sex. So don't go over crossing all these lines and playing this ridiculous thing of, gee, well, as long as I didn't really do this or that, then it's not real sex. And you know what really breaks my heart? There's a lot of people, young people, who do everything except intercourse, thinking that it's not sex, but they're saving intercourse for marriage. They are so disappointed on their wedding night. These are the people who literally, on their wedding, they finally have intercourse. They are so bummed because they really expected it to be something really different. And that's when they learn it's really not all that different. You do all this other stuff, get yourself all jacked up and all turned on and stuff. Man, you're going in a place that you really shouldn't be going in the first place. Don't be playing this game of, well, it's not really sex if we just did this or we just did oral or all this. Hey, you're touching stuff down there. It's sex. Knock it off. I don't know that it's so much as expected, but it really is getting more and more that way where girls feel more and more freedom or even pressure to be very aggressive sexually towards their boyfriends. A lot of it just is birthed out of this porn culture that we're into and the highly sexualized atmosphere that you see in movies and TV, and the girls are all given this culture of, ooh, you really want a guy, you got to go chase him, and you can be as sexual as they are. And it's even part of this, idea that women can be as bad as guys can be. It's not helpful and can be very, very destructive. And a lot of girls buy into the idea that, gee, if I'm going to really get him to love me, then I've got to be very sexual with him. So by being very aggressive sexually, they think this is how I'm going to land the guy. What you'll land is a guy who wants to put you to bed, but you won't really find someone who really, really loves you. Most studies show that even when there's serious dating going on, once you start having sex, it's just a matter of weeks before the guy dumps you. I mean, this whole idea that girls should be real sexual aggressively and then that, that this will help land them a boy, it's not true. The opposite happens. The truth is probably the most attractive, sexy thing a woman can ever say to a boy is no. You deal with it by limiting your exposure to the culture. We need to be smarter than we are, for crying out loud. I'm shocked at how many young people, Christian young people, and parents allow these guys to look at R-rated movies and all this real sexual stuff on television and stuff. You think that's not going to affect you? Of course it's going to affect you. The more you put yourself in a situation where you're open to that kind of ideas coming at you, the more it's going to affect the way that you behave. So we got to be smarter than that. Limit that culture. Limit your exposure to dirty movies or even racy movies. If you know something's blatantly going to be sexual in certain types of films and stuff, just don't go see them. I mean, we're just asking ourselves for trouble when we say, gee, I want to do it right, and I want to serve God right, and I want to have the healthiest possible marriage by doing it right, but then I'm dumb as a brick going out looking at all kinds of stuff that encourages me to do that, Watch what you pay attention to, Don't spend hours and hours watching all the garbage on MTV and all this other kind of stuff that is just pushing all the sexuality at you. You got to be smarter than that, okay? What you watch, what you pay attention to will greatly affect you. The Bible says, as a man thinks, so he is. And if you spend a lot of time thinking about bad stuff, you is going to become a bad person. So you've got to be smarter than that. The Bible says whatever things are good and right and just, think about those things. What happens here will ultimately determine what happens here and in your behavior in your life. So limit the exposure. I get it. You can't just dig a hole and hide. You can hardly watch TV without seeing commercials that are sex everywhere. You can't hardly watch a burger commercial without sex being thrown at. I know you can't hide in a bomb shelter. So I'm not saying to be ridiculous about it. But then on the other hand, look, things are rated certain ways or things that are blatantly sexual by nature. Even if your friends are all looking at it, who cares? Don't go there. Watch what you're paying attention to, and you'll find that you'll be able to succeed in life. If you keep feeding this with garbage in, garbage out. most of the sex that's portrayed in TV and movies is not real sex. It's all this fantasy of all this intense lust and desire. The lust and cravings and all this stuff tears down more than it builds up. Sex is supposed to be about making love. What they've made it about is just this huge, big physical experience, which, by the way, usually doesn't pan out that way anyway. You know, it's amazing how many love scenes on TV or in movies starts out with a girl being body slammed up against the wall as they're tearing each other's clothes off. You know, it's, oh, come on, you know. They are portraying something that it's not based in reality, and it's certainly not making love, and it's certainly not the kind of sexual connection that will hold two people together for a lifetime. So again, watch what you're paying attention to. Limit those kinds of scenes and stuff that you are able to look at in TVs and movies. If it's full of that kind of stuff, don't look at the movie, look at something else. You know, as a traditional pastor, clearly I'm against the whole homosexual lifestyle thing in the first place. A lot of people will say, well, I am gay, therefore I have to do it. I would argue that that's how you find out if you're gay in the first place, is by sexually experimenting. That's why you shouldn't be sexually experimenting. That's why you ought to be saving yourself for your partner for life. This whole idea of experimenting and stuff like that generally does not turn out well. It can, on the light side, it can cause it so that you're no longer sexually pure and you lose your virginity, and then you can start carrying the weights and guilts of all of that. To the worst, you might be experimenting so much that you wind up turning to a totally different lifestyle that God never intended for you in the first place. So don't fall into this trap that, gee, you need to experiment, you know, because that's how you really find out who you are. No, 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 no. You experiment, that's how you get yourself in trouble. First of all guys do not do it, okay? That's number one. A lot do, I get it, because men are by nature visually stimulated. They've bought into the lie, sadly, that it doesn't matter, but it does really matter. And what happens is a lot of guys get so conditioned to looking at pictures and falling in love with people that aren't really there that they aren't interested in their own wives at some point. I mean, this is a major problem today. You would be stunned. I mean, I probably get more complaints about women who come to me who say their husbands don't want to have sex with them anymore. I'm talking girls in their 20s, in their early 30s, who their husbands don't want to have sex with them at all. They waited until marriage, and now he doesn't want to have sex with her at all. She feels completely robbed. Why? Because this Nimrod has been looking at porn for the last 10, 15 years and masturbating. And that's what he's conditioned his body to. And he's more interested in looking at porn and making love to himself instead of being the pursuant lover of her. So porn, is it damaging? Absolutely. When people tell you it's no big deal, do not buy into it. And you guys, for crying out loud, be real men. You want to grow up into real men. You want to be a real guy who knows how to make love to a real woman, to pursue your wife and have a fabulous sex life with a real human being. You start falling in love with this idea of porn and pictures and making love to yourself, it will mess you up. You don't want to go there. Stop it. It's just that simple. Any kind of destructive behavior you need to stop. If you're a person who's been drinking a lot of alcohol, stop. You're going to become an alcoholic if you don't. If you're starting to experiment with drugs, stop. If you're starting to get into porn and masturbation, stop, for crying out loud. Again, a lot of people say, well, they got to do something because they're not going to get married till they're almost 30. That's the problem. This delayed marriage thing is insane, for crying out. Again, I'm not saying you have to get married young. You don't ever have to get married. You're 93 for all I care. But you have this sex drive and you want to have this met in your life, don't be looking to porn and masturbating, all this kind of stuff. It will wreck your life. It can mess you up, man. I am stunned by the number of couples that struggle today. They can't have a normal sex life because one or both of them were into porn and masturbating and all this other kind of stuff. It's not worth it. You're already into this stuff, stop it. You don't want to go down this path. Because what happens is a lot of people become literally addicted to this behavior, and then later when they do get married, they cannot stop. You don't want that to be you. There is a definite escalation with pornography, and everybody will acknowledge it. Now, the world will tell you it's no big deal as long as you monitor it and make sure it doesn't get out of control. But even they admit it's got to keep getting ratcheted up. What you start out early with, a couple of pictures of naked people is not enough. It's got to get crazier and crazier and crazier, and you got to keep upping the dosage and the intensity and the bizarreness of it, or you can't feel stimulated anymore. And there are people, a lot of people, quite frankly, who've gotten so stimulated by porn and kept ratcheting it up, they got to a place where nothing does it for them. It's an extremely sad situation. There's nothing they can see that will allow them to get excited enough to have sex. They can't maintain an erection. Guys who cannot maintain erections at all, they can never have sex with a woman, they can never have sex, they can't even masturbate because they've gotten so stimulated and they've been so into porn, keep ratcheting it up until you finally hit a wall at some point where nothing works. So it's a destructive cycle. Now, obviously, that's not everybody. That's an extreme situation. But you want to be careful with this stuff. It's not worth it. You don't know, but it'll happen to you. So why not just do this stuff right in the first place? Porn is one of the most destructive things in our culture today. It is robbing men of the energy of being real men to real women. It's making women feel like second-class citizens. Girls can't compete with these super babe models on in these pictures and on these videos and stuff. It's a loser for everybody. Everybody gets discouraged, and then people in their marriages aren't having real sex anymore. They live in this fantasy world of porn and stuff, and it's pathetic, and it's sad, and it's heartbreaking. Everybody loses. So while there's this great appeal, especially to young boys, of porn, ooh, how exciting, you don't want to go there. This keeps getting ratcheted up, and you'll need more and more stimulation, and it has a huge potential for wrecking your sex life. A recent survey that we were just looking at, 74%, this is a survey of thousands of women, 74% of them admitted that they don't feel like they're able to get enough sex from their husbands today, which is very odd because you would always think it's the other way around. 52% of women said they're not getting any more sex anymore from their husbands. I mean, that's unbelievably shocking. And when you ask them why, they'll say because their husbands prefer to look at porn. So the girls look out, the guys aren't even experienced real women. It's pathetic, it's a loser deal. Porn is the biggest destructive trap that is threatening your generation today. You need to avoid it like the plague. Do not go there. It is not worth it.